Welcome back to the Disrupt Education Podcast. I'm Peter Strasser here with my co-host Alli. What a great podcast last week. I almost said last weekend, but it felt like a weekend. Well, we're kind of on a weekend here doing some of our work. How's it going? What's happening?
Life is good. We just got off the air. You'll hear this a week later, but
Mhm.
with Mr. Miller, Bobby Miller, Mr. Miller's woodshop. Uh, what an incredible educator. And his story is just if you are in the trenches in education, or you know someone who's in the trenches of education and they're not feeling it, his episode is
Yeah,
the one to share because he will load you up with stories and like heartfelt passion of like why being in the classroom is transformational. And he's just like I feel like there's a golden era in everyone's teaching career, and he may not know this, but I believe he is in it.
yeah,
Right, where you're just like you're you're really just so into what you're doing. The unique thing about Bobby is that he can shut it off. And I
yeah,
think that's what's going to sustain him. And I felt like that was just such a powerful note in his podcast. He was like, look, I don't normally stay after school. I'm only doing this for the podcast. Like, I do not work nights and weekends. I do not work holidays. His boundaries are like so clear,
yeah,
but he also is like, the work that he's doing when he's there is so disruptive in like all the right ways, which is why we had him on.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I love the fact that he kind of shared the realities of education, yet he
Mm.
didn't really just, just oh, these are all the only bad things. Yeah, there is, politics in this game. There is people who are going to challenge you when you change, and he just like that's 2% over here, and then everything else is where we're at. And there are so many pieces that I can take out and really just hear him talking about, like, as a teacher, giving students the autonomy to look up, and you can be lazy and in a good way. And I like that you brought that up because it always takes me back to Jen Sharp. I just love that episode, um, because that he's doing that. One of the things he said is that it helps me able to work harder. Like, who says that, right? Like, I mean, that means like he can go deeper into conversations with students. He can, yeah, obviously you have classroom management things, and you're always going to have that. Those are never going to go away, by the way. If you get an education, you're like, oh man, my so and so has a perfect class. They don't. Okay, let's just just put that out there. However, like he can go talk to somebody who's maybe struggling working on something. He can, in the things that he didn't really say, there was those conversations that you can have with students about their life, understanding who they are, going a little bit deeper into that kind of a relationship where you can kind of understand, hey, this is what are you very interested in, or did how was the volleyball game? All these different things that you can do because you have taken yourself out of the information giver and you have put yourself in the role of the mentor, which is exactly what he talked about his mentor woodshop teacher. And that's that, see what the inspiration, see how that happened. So I really loved those stories that he shared.
He shared so many good stories. I mean, I'm thinking of how we kicked off 2025 with Mark Essex and just this idea of getting kids engaged, and you need to do it immediately. And I think one of the ways to do that is to let them release students to their own learning.
Yep.
You could feel the battle he was feeling internally with his own feelings about technology, and then also school policy around technology,
Mhm.
and him having to be like, I'm finding a way to compete with technology and win and show kids like the good uses of technology because I know it's what's best for kids in learning in this environment. And he created a system to basically allow students, once they're checked off on their safety in the shop, to go and do the experiments or the create the thing. I would use experiments because that's
The chemistry teacher
chemistry
came
teacher.
out there.
It did. Thinking about my own experiment, but to allow them to go and do the building and have step-by-step videos that he's crafting. And he says if you're a shop teacher and you want access to these, they're available on his YouTube, and he's creating all the things. And I I can't think of a better way to grab kids' attention and release them. And like they can come in and answer their own questions. You've provided them the resources. They aren't waiting on you. That's what kids now, they're like bored, so to speak, because they're used to the TikTok videos capturing their attention. Well, no wonder the kids that are struggling in other classes are thriving in his, is because they are getting to not only work with their hands, they're getting to use really dangerous power tools, which that's always a big selling point, right?
Yeah, right.
But then, uh, right, they don't have to wait for it. So they're like being entrusted. I feel like today's youth, more than anything, want purpose. They want to feel like what they're doing is purposeful. I can tell you so many times as a teacher how rewarding it was to build something, paint something, do something with my hands because that work was fruitful. There was an end product. So a woodshop class where you're making an end table or a rocking chair or something would be very rewarding for a young person. It's as rewarding for me as an adult who doesn't always have something I have created, right? We
Hmm.
live in this consume, consume, consume environment, but to be in a classroom where you are create, create, create is disruptive. I will also say, if you missed his episode talking about the sad reality that was our timeline in 2010 to 2015, where a lot of these shop programs got shut down and now are being brought back to life,
Hmm.
reinvigorated because of social media, you need to hear that from Bobby because it's real. We've talked about it before on the podcast, and it's so interesting. His quote, where he said, computers are the future, right? And it's so full circle that, 10, 15 years ago, people were really like, just kids are never going to have to work with their hands, to now it being this renaissance where we don't want kids on their phone. We want them working with their hands. So it's like, you can't, in education, you can't just go with like these pulling forces. It is politics, but it just goes to show you that the programs that hung on and like made it through are really seeing the benefits,
Hmm.
because they didn't lose everything.
Right.
I mean, there's so much in there. Like we were like, this podcast is going to be so easy to do because Bobby drops so many just key things
Yeah.
in his podcast that are just, they apply everywhere in
Right.
all of education, whether or not he sees it. Well,
Hmm.
we see it because we have these conversations all the time.
Right.
What do
I
you
mean,
think?
there's so many layers. I wanted to focus on like kind of, the students, go ahead and getting the instructions themselves and finding them and working at, whatever paces they are or whatnot. We've heard it over and over on the podcast, talking to professionals. What do people want in an employee or as an entrepreneur? What do you have to do? And we can go all the way into durable skills and all these things is students, learners in general, and when I say learners, I mean we're still learning, right? Is what they need to do is to really find out, okay, when they hit a bump or they hit a wall, find out, be proactive, talk to people, find the answer, use your tools, and in this case, your phone or whatever, to actually use it as a tool to get to an answer and or a possible solution. And that if people can communicate that and do that at, at any age, they're going to be successful. And so when we start looking at like, I mean, I think it's just the tip of the iceberg of how this class could keep going. I mean, I'm immediately thinking, okay, what's the next step? Is the next step like in an advanced class where the actual students are creating the how-to videos? Like, I mean, they have to teach somebody else. They have to, okay, maybe they're making an end table and then now they have to make something else. and it's their choice, or they get to choose something and then they get to create it. So there's so many, like there's this self-learning piece. And I think that in traditional education, we've gotten so far away from curiosity and self-sustaining learning that everybody got burnt out. And one thing that you were saying there, Allie, was if you remember, he kind of got away from creating woodworking because of family and a lot of, how he's spending his time. But then he said, when I created that one thing, I'm like, he stopped himself and said, look, I built that. What's interesting is, and maybe if he's listening to this, like you're like, Bobby, you've created online. So even that's creation, right? So you've created your service learning in helping others online. So that's a creation too. It doesn't always have to be, in it can be in cyberspace or wherever on online or whatever. So there's so many layers to that where what are we teaching kids to do? We need to have them to be self-sufficient, to be like, self-starters. They need to really kind of go in. And if something goes wrong, and I know when you say that in a workshop, everybody goes freaks out a little bit. But if something goes wrong, they need to have a mentor or somebody there to kind of walk them through it if they need that, and there's communication there. So there's so many layers to how this class is being run. And then what I want our listeners to start thinking about is no matter where you are in education, like how can you take these pieces and apply it to whatever you're trying to help people understand? Bobby's trying to help people understand woodworking, which is amazing. My grandfather was a great woodworker, but he was also, guess what, a veterinarian. So, like, there's so many different things that we can do, and teaching people how to find an answer, a possible solution, and then work it out and see what happens. That's what the levels of this just got crazy in my head.
Are so many levels to what Bobby is doing. And, he said on the podcast, no, I'm just a woodshop teacher. I'm like, I think you're a normal woodshop teacher,
Yeah, he's
Bobby.
humble.
That's so, yeah, he's very humble. But his mind is always going. It's like, and he's self-aware enough to realize that what he was consuming was really important.
Yeah.
And I mean, I needed to hear that because we're all in some way consuming things at times that are probably not fruitful. They're not.
Mhm.
It's just this device is a absolutely a dangerous power tool, and I was a wake up call for me even
Yeah.
to be even more cognizant of what I'm consuming, because it does affect then like what you are creating, right? He said, "Look, I started investing my ear time, so to speak, with woodworking, wood shop type podcast, our podcast. Thank you, Bobby.
Mhm.
Um, in order to get more ideas around the things he was already interested in, rather than see what his buddies from high school were doing on Facebook. And it is interesting. Not only did he realize that, but he it's so funny because he says like, oh, like I do talk from both sides of my mouth. That's okay because he's self-aware enough to realize when there's a gap, a mismatch, because he said, he really doesn't like technology. He doesn't want to be posting things that about his family and everything. Yet he's now realizing the importance of sharing what he's doing in wood shop and in the work he's doing as an educator and trying to get it out there on all platforms. I, this is just for anybody who's trying to do that, kudos to you. And also, you don't have to be everywhere. I'll just, I'm just, you can play. People will find you. I think Bobby has is now, he's podcasting, he's going to all these shows, he's doing all these things. Like that's what I'm talking about. Like when if you're a school leader, you're a school administrator, you want to kind of feed someone like Bobby.
Yeah.
You want to invest in them, invest in your best, right? Like that's what Dr. TJ talked to us about. And this is a prime example of that. And, I don't see him slowing down because he's created really strong boundaries, really strong systems in his classroom. And it's not lazy.
Hmm.
I want everybody to hear like what he's doing is disruptive because it's so good. I love that he was just basically like, and he had strong mentorship. It's like when you close those classroom doors, you are ultimately, you know what's best for your students and
Hmm.
educators to be treated as professionals and be supported by admin. You know, he talks about feeling scared sharing what he was doing because it was against school policy, and he
Hmm.
did it anyway.
Right.
Like if you need someone to like get you amped up to like disrupt education, go talk to Bobby because he's doing it. It's like,
I
yeah, I just decided I'm gonna do it.
Right. Yeah. That is actually like the switch because I mean, we do need educators that are going to, test out different ways of doing things. Obviously, you have to be safe, you have to follow legalities, all that. I get that, right? But here's a shop teacher, right? I mean, I mean, we've had other like woodworking areas of people on here. We've had lawyers talking about this, so it can be done, and maybe that's why we always jump into like the dangerous wood shop. I mean, we've had a couple of great guests around that, but when you're talking with like somebody like Bobby and those different things where you're going into an area that is just super dangerous. I mean, it can be super dangerous in there. And giving people, like you said, you give them the the self-sufficiency of building confidence and being able to go through something. And it didn't really seem like there was a lot of competition in the class in a bad way. I mean, maybe there is, but like you're just basically competing with yourself. And guess what? Here it is. It's out here. You can take a look at it. This is how you build it. But I think the other thing is when that administrator stood up in the conference and spoke for him, and as a teammate, that makes a ton of difference. How do you
Mhm.
get to that point? Well, that administrator was able to get into the classroom and to see it happen. However, a lot of times, and we've talked to a lot of administrators as well. They're just spread so thin. There's so much going on. You never know. So what I like what Bobby's doing is, I mean, he is out talking about it. He is sharing stories, showing stories of quote unquote the data. And I think that's
Mhm.
very important. If you are an educator and you're feeling stuck, and like Allie, you said, like, just good Lord, like listen to this guy because he's just so happy. That was a Friday afternoon, right? And he's loving telling his story. And even the first 5 minutes of that podcast, you could just feel like this guy is in his dream job.
Yep.
But it's not a dream job because it's just happening. It's a dream job because, you're trying things and you're being curious. And even if things don't go well, talk with your students and say, okay, that didn't work. What could you help me with? I did write a blog years ago that this conversation with Bobby kind of brought up some of those like I did a video, and it was when I was at Stag High School, and I did a video for to promote our internship class, and like I showed it to the students before I put it out there, and like three students said, "Mr. H, this video sucks." And I'm like, thank you. Right. And they're like, whoa, some of the other kids are like, oh my gosh, you just said that. And I'm like, yes, because you guys we're advertising to you. And if you think it sucks, it's not going to work. So let's build. And then there's learning in that as well. And I feel like, I'm sure like he even said today I had to write up two kids. So it's not working perfectly for everybody. Right. Okay, how can we make it better, right? And I just love like that, thinking about that is, as an educator to take a risk. And probably one of the risks, I mean, you've had like some different things, obviously in chemistry, there's chemicals, there's all different kinds of things that you can do there as well. But you got to take those risks, and sometimes you just got to ask for forgiveness if something goes wrong, or show that you guys learned from it. That's the way I look at it.
Right. I mean, I shared this a little bit on last week's episode about I did very similar work building out and creating videos of labs ahead of time, the pre-lab, so kids could visualize it, they could see what they were going into, and then the mechanics would be much easier. So they could actually focus on observing and noticing what was happening while they were doing the mechanics rather than the mechanics and observing. You know, using machines and power tools is dangerous. Working with concentrated acids is dangerous. And like, and so I think it's actually safer. I loved being able to film the front row, viewpoint and get kids to actually see, because if you've got a class of 24 or more and you're trying to get them all around a space for you to see pretty small tools, and his are even bigger, but there's still only certain angles where you can see stuff. I actually think that's safer. I
Hmm.
think that's better. And we didn't get into this on the podcast. He is quoted in a couple articles and whatnot. And he has said, it's tempting to set up your educational program and not change it. We've heard
Right.
that lots of times. He talked about, he referred to his mentor teacher and did a lot of things like that. But his mentor teacher said, "Oh, well, now you've perfected it." He doesn't believe that, but
Right.
he has changed it. He is
Hmm.
changing it. It is improving it. And that's disruptive. You may not think that it's making an impact, but it is making an impact.
Yeah.
And I think those are the types of messages that need to get out more so that people feel like I can do this. I can do something that's quote unquote anti-policy, or it's not what everyone else is doing right now, because it's what's better for kids.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think what he's doing is better for kids, not only for safety but for learning. And it's just interesting that there is this renaissance coming. We've seen it. More and more school leaders and programs are being built to promote this type of learning. We're just trying to elevate even ones in a very traditional system in Minnesota. Like, largest school district is getting on board with somebody doing this type of work, then you can too, right? We've highlighted a couple, educators that are in different types of, school systems, big, small, rural, city, suburban, etc., just to try and showcase the vast variety of programs. And we're going to keep doing it, of course,
Hmm.
but that are doing this type of work inside the system. We really feel strongly here on the Disrupt Education podcast that the educators who listen, the school leaders who listen to this podcast, are the ones that are, deep in the work, that need to be highlighted and elevated so that more people can know about that work and show that we're not alone. We're not alone in this. There's still lots of work to be done, obviously, but Bobby needs more support even in his own school district. I don't want people like Bobby to feel like I can't do this for whatever reason,
Hmm.
right? I think when you and I sit down and we think, why do we have these conversations? Why do we put out these conversations? Is because if I'm ever in a school again, I don't want to have that fear that what I'm doing is too disruptive and I might get fired.
Right.
I want the energy to be, I'm going to do something quote unquote different, disruptive, because it's what's best for kids, and it's going to engage kids in new and exciting ways, and I have support. I have the backing. Like, the culture is already in place. That's what we dream of. So we don't want, that angst and anxiety to be there. We want more and more people to be like, I know I have the support of my administrators.
Hmm.
I know my community supports and wants this. I know that the industry around wants to support this, right? Like, all of these things converging. And I think that's also the opportunity for Bobby, and is to work more with the community and grow the program to get kids internships. And I don't want to put too much on Bobby, but I'm just saying, like, there are lots of opportunities with the work that he's doing, that I'm sure have yet to be explored. And for whatever program you're in too, you know, you don't have to do it all,
Right.
right? You can start with something and grow it and change it. You don't have to keep it how it always was. And I think this time of year, you can feel like, oh, man, it's another year. I just did the same thing. I'm not going to get out of this rut. Well, we're coming to summer when this comes out. I mean, it's
Hmm.
within view at least.
Spring
And
cleanup.
yeah, you can do it. That's
Yeah.
what I feel.
I hear that, and along with that, I think one of the most interesting things that Bobby said, which I really like, is where is your focus? Like if you're focusing on the negative, you're going to focus on the negative. If you're going to focus on trying to connect with people and find people, you will find people who are doing disruptive things. And I think that's what this podcast is pretty much all about. This series is about people who are working and doing some interesting things. And you look across social media. I mean, I know LinkedIn is our space where we do a lot of our work. There's some Instagram and different things like that. I felt really old when he said LinkedIn is kind of boring, and I'll be a man, but whatever, But people, wherever your tribe is, wherever you're working with disruptors, find them. And honestly, it just takes one call. Like these conversations are legitimately like just innovators in education having conversations, and then we're pulling it out. Whether you're an admin, whether you're in community, whether you're teaching, whatever. So that's what I really, really like about the conversations that Allie and I have with a lot of these educators. We're still got more coming up, but don't forget to subscribe, follow us, Spotify, everywhere. We're YouTube. Also, hook up. We're on LinkedIn mostly. So if you're out on LinkedIn, look us up. We have all our connects down below. And let's connect. I mean, I think, I don't know about you, Ali, but my kind of connections in 2024 through 2025 are just, it's hockey sticking up, which means it's a good thing. There's so many innovators out there, and I've learned
Yeah.
so much that I can transfer that knowledge, whether you're on the podcast or not, just watching posts and watching different things with people. I have applied them in classroom environments. And I found success. I mean, so it's a fun place to be. It's your playground. So, with that being said, I am Peter Hostrasser. That is Ali Dahl. Thank you all for hanging out with us on the Disrupt Education podcast. We'll see you next week. Talk to you later. Thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of the Disrupt Education Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode.
Are you ready to disrupt the educational arena you're a part of? For more ways to get involved in the work we do here at Disrupt Education, check us out at disrupteducation.co or find us on LinkedIn at Peter Hostrasser or Alli Privet.
Our mission here is to help facilitate and amplify changes in the educational system through local initiatives and help you scale them into community movements. Our building network of disruptors in education are working to move beyond scores and grades as the only measure for student learning. If your school district, college, campus, or organization is looking for facilitators of this work, reach out on our website or social media.
And if you have any thoughts or feedback on this week's episode or any episode, we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries, taking risks, and most importantly, disrupting education.